you have to put the right fuel into the body. And unfortunately, most people are putting really dirty fuel into their gas tank and they're ruining the engines. And that's what's happening when you eat packaged processed food or gas station food or anything you find at the cereal aisle of a grocery store. All that stuff is garbage.
Hello and welcome to the BSU podcast, where we show you how to optimize your health and fitness through biomarker tracking and nutrition. If you want to look and feel better, train harder or live longer, this show is for you. I'm your host, Daniel Maggs, co-founder and CEO of BSU. In this episode, you'll learn about why doctors should prescribe food as medicine, the power of continuous glucose monitoring, how to protect your mitochondria, gut and organ health, and how to use fasting to improve your metabolic flexibility. Today's guest is Dr. Molly Maloof. Molly runs a concierge medical practice which specializes in helping people optimize their health and longevity using food, lab tests, and self-tracking devices. She's also a lecturer at Stanford University's Wellness Department in the School of Medicine, where she teaches a course entitled Live Better Longer, Enhancing Healthspan for Longer Lifespan. Previously, Molly was head of medical science at Sano, a Silicon Valley startup making a continuous glucose monitor. She's a frequent speaker in health and wellness circles and a passionate advocate for sustainable, healthy living. Molly, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
One thing that makes you so interesting is that you've come from the conventional medical world and you've crossed over into wellness, and really you're in both now. So can you tell us about where you sit and how you found yourself making that journey?
Well, I have always been interested in health and performance since I was a young child. I used supplements in 8th grade. That was not a normal person as a child. Okay. So, I basically, found myself interested in understanding my body. And I remember very, very, very clearly when I was in, 6th grade, when I hit puberty, and I was like, someday I'm going to understand this body. This is so weird. I don't know what's happening, but someday I'm going to understand all this. I'm going to have an explanation for everything that's going on inside me. And the truth is that I've spent a lot of my life running self-experiments to figure out how my body works and to help it work better. And, it's funny that I've kind of become a leader in this space they call biohacking when there wasn't even a term for it when I was growing up. I was just trying to understand what was happening inside me. And in medical school, I got particularly interested in optimizing my own performance because I was really unhappy, super stressed out, thought I was, needing prescription medicine from a psychiatrist because I was so miserable. And so when I basically got to the point of getting professional help, because I was so burned out, they were like, you're not crazy. You're just stressed out. You don't take good care of yourself. Why don't you try that? And I said, oh my God, wow, that's all I need to do is take better care of myself. This isn't like a disease or anything. And they're like, no. So I thought it was a really good thing that psychologist did for me. Because a lot of people go to doctors and they just hand them drugs. But this psychologist was like, you don't need drugs. You need to take care of yourself. And it was the best gift anyone has ever given me because it gave me so much power to actually look at my life and look at how I was living and ask myself, I was the exact stereotype of a medical student who sat in front of her computer, studied all day long, sacrificed her health for her grades. And really her grades were suffering because of her health. And when I connected that, I was like, oh, so what will happen if I take better care of myself? Let's see. So I started studying evidence-based lifestyle medicine, and I started looking into medical research on how do I make my body function better. And I realized I needed to meditate. I realized I needed to eat more regular meal times. I actually needed to eat more often. I was eating too little at the time. I needed to, spend more time with my family and my friends. I was isolating myself because I thought all I had time to do was study. There was just so much information to learn that I didn't really have time to do much else, I thought. So it turns out I was wrong. I actually had time to do it all. And in fact, I also had time to sleep more. And I stopped drinking so much espresso. I stopped doing a lot of maladaptive behaviors that were causing me to not be in my best health. And surprisingly, I started getting really good grades. Like my grades went from average to outstanding. And my board exam scores went from, literally average with test anxiety and not sleeping the night before to getting a 99th percentile on my second board exam. And that doesn't happen very often. So a lot of my peers found out and they said, how did you do this? This is weird. Like, what did you do? I'm like, I really just started taking better care of myself and I slept really well the night before and I had healthy breakfast that day and I went and I took the test. And they were like, no. Like, what else did you do? And I'm like, well, I did all this. I did this and that and started eating regular meal times. And I started doing yoga and I started meditating and I started spending time with my family again. And they were just like, whoa, this is so crazy. Like you're doing so well and you're so much happier. So I was kind of like generally ahead of the curve and on a lot of things, but I really felt that this was important. I got to my residency, found that the workload combined with the culture of medicine was just super maladaptive to health. And so I decided to get my medical license and to take a jump into the tech scene and started working with companies, started working as an advisor or consultant to early stage startups. And then also started my own medical practice because I had a fairly strong belief that if I were to go out and try to help people become as healthy as possible, that, even if I wasn't a board certified physician, that I could make a difference in the world. And so that was really my intention is, going out and teaching people about health through lifestyle. And that's where I am today.
That's awesome. You said that health happens between office visits. So I guess you could say that most patients are taking snapshots of their health rather than movies, right? So in your practice, how do you help people to take movies of their health? How do you interpret the picture that you see?
I mean, the best tool that I use for clients is the continuous glucose monitor, because this device has traditionally been used for diabetics to manage their disease. But the reason why a person is diabetic is because they're not healthy. So the thing is that diabetes is just a symptom of an unhealthy organism that's not adapting to its environment or its food supply. So you put a glucose monitor on someone before they even become diabetic, and it reflects how they eat and when they eat and where they eat and how stressed out they are when they're eating and how much they move and how they sleep and, how their liver's functioning and how their muscles are processing glucose. And it's just such a beautiful picture into a lifestyle. So I love that tool. I mean, I discover things every day with putting these on clients, whether it be certain, programs I thought were healthy that aren't. Like, I put a client on a fasting mimicking diet and she was wearing a glucose monitor, and lo and behold, the food products she was eating were spiking her blood sugar. And we would have never known that. And it's surprising that there's things that are sold as healthy that may actually not be perfectly sound scientifically, even though they may have tons of research behind them. If you don't look at the real world use case of these products, you don't actually find out how they work and in the real world, really. So that's always interesting. And then you can also use these tools to help people course correct in the moment. So if your blood sugar is spiking, you can go do some exercise and you can get it to drop very quickly. And so I can't wait for getting an implantable glucose monitor. I'm sure I'm going to get one before, the next year or so, because they just came out with these clinical tools doctors can prescribe and actually learn to insert in people. So I'm very close to becoming a cyborg, but the data, it's really just about gathering as much data as you can on a person. And, I do check in with some of my clients every week, and that provides me with, a really in-depth perspective on their health and their life. And not every doctor gets to do that, but I have a very small panel because I have high touch care.
That's awesome. It sounds like you're trying to strike the balance between health tracking that's natural, but not neurotic, right? And there's so many devices you can choose from, but you want the right balance of minimum pain, reasonable time, decent cost, also things that are just actionable. So if you had to choose one biometric for general health, glucose is obviously a great place to start.
Yeah. Glucose and heart rate variability are both really important. I mean, they're real time.
So you specialize also in helping people to extend their health span to maximize their health, their life expectancy. What things do you look at when you're helping people to make changes? And really, what are the key factors they should look at to help extend that?
I mean, a big thing is I look at a lot of labs first and foremost to get an idea of where their baseline health is at. So I want to know, what is their iron metabolism? What is their, what is the white blood cell count? Is it if it's high, that's a big red flag. What is their CRP level? If that's high, another red flag. What's their vitamin D? If that's low, then their immune system's compromised. That's a problem. What do their minerals look like? What does their comprehensive metabolic panel tell me about their kidney function or their liver function? And what is their fasting glucose, hemoglobin A1C, fasting insulin? I want to see their lipid metabolism, their lipoproteins. I want to see their hormone metabolism. And all of these things tell me, like, what are these different systems doing? Are they functioning at their best, or do they need to be optimized? And a lot of these tools in these labs give me very specific recommendations for patients, whether it be a custom supplement protocol or a custom fitness protocol or a custom nutrition protocol or, stress management recommendations or even environmental changes. Like one of my clients had significant levels of mold mycotoxins in his urine and he has to move. He has no choice. Like it's his home is poisoning him. So I used to think some of these things were not real, but then you start measuring them and then you're like, well, if you can see it on the wall and you can see it in the urine, you're probably going to have mold mycotoxicity. So, it's not the first thing I look at, but environment really matters. You have to pay attention to that. And then beyond that, I'm also looking at the history, right? Like the history is a big picture of a person's health and their life. It is the movie of their life. So I'm asking them questions about their childhood medical history, what it was like for them in utero. I'm asking them about their family history. I'm asking them about their relationship with their parents, with their partners, with their environment, with their food, with their fitness. And I'm really getting the qualitative markers about their health. And then from there, you can take the quantitative markers from urine, blood, stool, saliva, and layer that upon the qualitative markers. And now you can start seeing these patterns of expression of health or disease.
Absolutely. You've also talked about something called organ reserve when you look at people's health. Can you tell us what that actually is and why it's important?
So every time we tax our organs with work to do, it wears out the organ. Okay. And so if you think about a person's life, their organs are only going to last as long as they are taken care of. So if you look at these organs and their capacity to do their job, if we tax them over time, we lose their reserve. And another facet of organ reserve is this concept of bioenergetic capacity. So your cells can only work as long as they are energized to have the ability to run the function. So if you think about the body and the organs, if they don't have enough power to do their job, they're not going to work, right? They're not going to do work. Like you need energy to do work. So part of organ reserve is literally having the energetic capacity to do the work, which means that as we get older, if we lose bioenergetic capacity, and you've talked to anybody who's in middle age who tells you, yeah, I don't have the energy I had when I was younger, that's a sign of lost capacity. So that's when you start seeing biomarkers shift. You start seeing the end organ reflection of the shift in the body on the biomarkers, which the numbers change because they're no longer able to maintain homeostatic capacity, which means they're no longer able to maintain the normal range of function. So they're starting to shift their normal range into the abnormal range. And that's when we start seeing things like hypertension, which is high blood pressure, the inability to maintain proper blood pressure, or we see high cholesterol, or we see high blood sugar. And we call these disease states, right? But they're actually just symptoms of a body losing organ reserve and losing its ability to maintain bioenergetic capacity.
Okay, so when you see those things happening, are there ways to make changes to limit that degradation?
the first thing you have to do is you have to send the signals to your body to make more energy. And the one thing that people do as they get older is they slow down. And as you slow down, that's sending the signal to your body to make less energy because it says, I don't have a demand. So that means I don't have to do the work, which means I'm not going to make the energy organelles. I'm not going to make more mitochondria if I don't have the demand to make more mitochondria. So energy demand is the signal that tells mitochondria to make more. But the problem is that if you slow down and you sit in front of the TV and you sit in front of a desk for 16 hours a day or 12 hours a day, and you don't move your body never gets the energy making signals. And so this is the adaptive capacity model. And I really believe it's true because I've found that just standing during the day, which I'm doing right now as we're on this podcast, totally shifts my energy level because my body's saying, oh, you've got a demand to stand up. Great. We're going to provide you with more energy to stand up. The same thing goes with movement. So weightlifting and high intensity interval training, even if it's a few sprints, that sends potent signals to make more mitochondria. So you got to send the signals if you want to make more energy, but you also have to have the fuel to run the power plants. So you have to put the right fuel into the body. And unfortunately, most people are putting really dirty fuel into their gas tank and they're ruining the engines. And that's what's happening when you eat packaged processed food or gas station food or anything you find at, the cereal aisle of a grocery store. All of that stuff is garbage and no one should touch it because it's not good fuel. So the kind of fuel that I eat is lots and lots of vegetables, a little bit of fruit. I eat lots of healthy fats, lean proteins, sometimes fatty proteins, depending on how I'm feeling, lots of fish, colorful vegetables is the core of my diet. And the reason why is you get fiber, you get heavy water from inside those cells, which is really good for maintaining that. It's basically maintaining your own hydration levels, which you need really proper hydration and minerals to drive these gradients, which are basically the batteries of our cells. So it's all about getting the pigments, getting the phytonutrients, getting the fiber to feed the microbiome, getting the structural components from amino acids, getting the fat to fuel the mitochondria, and not overdoing carbohydrates, not abusing the refined carbs and sugar. I mean, that's the number one thing I tell people is just minimize the sugar because it's in everything. And if you minimize all the things that it's in, you're basically left with whole food and real food instead of processed food. And if you can do that, then you're going to be way healthier for longer. And you're also going to look younger. I mean, the less sugar you eat, the less you glycate your cells of your the proteins of your cells, and the less you age, the less you literally cook yourself. Like carbohydrates they burn hot, and they also glycate. So that means that they attach these carbohydrate residues to proteins that literally, it's like the browning reaction when you take a steak and you put it on a hot pan and it turns brown. That's a Maillard reaction. And that is happening in your cells when you eat carbohydrate. So you don't want to overdo the carbs. You want to have the right amount of carbs, preferably ones that are bound to lots of water and not too much of them and not too much at the same time, especially not too much with fat at the same time. But these are some basic rules that you can follow and you'll be a lot healthier.
Okay. So you talked about the importance of high quality food, whole foods, minimizing sugar intake, having good carbohydrates. What's your view on fasting and calorie restriction? Is it something you think is important? Do you practice it yourself at all?
So lately I've been doing intermittent fasting because I have found that that's the thing that I can most consistently do. So I'll do 14 to 16 hours typically. Ideally 16 hours is ideal for me, but sometimes I manage, 14 hours if I just love breakfast. And usually it's because I'm socializing that I'm having dinner, but I really like to eat earlier in the day and stop eating earlier in the night. And it seems like a lot of the evidence is starting to suggest that that's the best time to eat anyway. So I'm not a big believer in late eating at all. Unless you're going to be socializing with people and you basically, need social interaction, which is super nourishing for the body. But I also do an occasional extended fast. And, I always fast on flights. So anytime I'm traveling, I'm fasting just because it helps you reset your circadian rhythms. And a good 24-hour fast here and there is also a great thing to do. I used to be a little bit more rigorous with fasting, but I'm really at a place where it's really about fitting into my lifestyle and being realistic with it. And I do think it's good to empty your glycogen stores periodically, but I'm doing a lot more weightlifting right now. And one of the things that you have to learn about with fasting is that it does improve muscle quality because it reduces the muscle fat, but it also makes, like, when you're exercising more, you also want to eat more, so you have more eating signals. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to fast, but I do think it's possible to do both, and I do recommend doing both. So it's just not it's just really the key is you have to modulate the stress. And if you're under an enormous amount of stress, that has got to be your main priority, not fasting. Fasting comes from when your body is in a place of being able to be challenged. And if your body cannot handle that challenge, then you shouldn't do it. So you have to build your body's capacity to handle that kind of metabolic training.
So let's say, for example, you're doing weight training in the gym, but you're also fasting. You might wake up, have something very small pre training, have your workout, then a fairly large post workout meal, and then be fasting for the rest of the day, right?
Yeah, or like eat 2 meals a day, and then maybe have that one snack before you start lifting. But just ending eating early. So I like to work out in the morning, preferably. I've really noticed that through self experimentation that if I work out in the morning, the rest of the day is easier. And so it's almost like I've gotten the hard thing out of the way. And so if I can fast, and I can work out in the morning and I can get a nice meal in around 5, it's a lot easier for me to fast till 9, from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. than it is from like 7 p.m. to 11. Personally, I just find it. I just like breakfast, and I like working out in the morning, and I like having some food around weightlifting. But that being said, there is some benefit to fasting exercise. You don't get as much performance on those days, but you are actually getting a conditioning effect. So there is benefits to doing some fasted cardio. You tend to get a benefit. It's kind of like wearing a weighted vest.
Okay, so just to get a little bit more technical, we know that calorie restriction generally promotes life expectancy, all things being equal. And there's some evidence, particularly in mouse studies, that fasting promotes something called autophagy or cell renewal. And of course, because of the restricted or no carbohydrate intake, it can improve insulin resistance and so on. But is it enough to just simply spend periods of time not eating and fasting, or do we actually need to be in a caloric deficit to get those benefits? Could it be an association or causation of fasting? What I want to understand is it about the not eating part, or is it about the calorie restriction as well?
I mean, so there's two camps of calorie restriction, right? There's the continuous calorie restriction, and then there's intermittent. And intermittent would be fasting, and continuous would be the people who just eat less per day, but they don't care about when they eat. So it's like time course shifting or just overall shifting. So the body very, very quickly adapts to the change in calories. So if you eat less per day, the body turns down metabolism like a thermostat. And by doing so, you're literally turning down heat production in the body. If you look at people who do continuous calorie restriction, they actually do look younger, but they also are very skinny. There is some evidence in animals that if you do more intermittent fasting, what you're doing is you're flipping the metabolic switch. And so you're shifting from carb to fat metabolism. And doing that trains your metabolism to basically shift gears more effectively. And so it seems like that calorie restriction through fasting can have similar benefits, if not more benefits, because of tapping into ketosis. So to me, it's probably more optimal. But you know what? We don't really know. It's more of a hypothesis. I think the key is if you're going to do continuous calorie restriction, to make sure you exercise to drop into those levels of ketosis. I know when I'm into ketosis because I can smell when it comes on, and I tend to drop in when I'm on a low carb diet or if I'm intermittent fasting. But I used to do continuous calorie restriction for years. And don't get me wrong, it works. It's just not, I kind of like eating. So I think that, I just kind of like fasting because I just think it's a little bit easier. to limit the time frame versus limit the calories. But that being said, like I am actively always seeking ways to trick my body into thinking that I'm eating more food than I'm eating. So that's why I eat tons and tons of vegetables. But I have a tendency to want to eat higher calorie dense foods. I love nuts and seeds. I love a good steak here and there. And I'm not a believer that there's any food that's off limits per se, aside from like trans fats and processed foods. So I'm kind of in the world of we need to kind of move away from restriction patterns because it's causing disordered eating and orthorexia. And we need to move towards actually living our lives and finding a lifestyle that works for us and that we enjoy. Because you can't just wake up one day and be like 85 and bored and alone at your table with your like crappy dinner that you've been eating for 50 years that you don't like that's not living. You want to be surrounded by people you love, enjoying the foods that you eat, enjoying the life that you're living, having times of feasting balanced with times of fasting, and following the rhythms of the environment. If you look at the environment, there are times of abundance and there are times of land going fallow, and that's part of the natural cycle of life. And I think that should be our goal, is just aligning ourselves with the natural patterns of nature.
Yeah. So that leads me to another question. I know you've experimented with keto, you've been on and off it, also a low carb diet. It feels like in the keto world, some people are still very much on pure keto, but there's more interest in cyclical keto or improving metabolic flexibility by switching diets. What do we know now about the effects of being on keto long term? Are there potential, health downsides to that, or is that unclear right now?
I'm pretty sure that the biggest downside is that your microbiome adapts to whatever diet you're placed on. And right now I'm in this like practice of trying to figure out how do I get as much fiber as I can into my diet. And the problem with keto is that it's a really low fiber diet. And so you're not feeding um you know you're not feeding the microbiome the things that it needs to thrive and flourish. And so that can be a problem, right? Like you need a strong and healthy microbiome to protect your mucosa and to have a strong immune system. So we've got to find balance. And, I'm actively looking at figuring out how to create my own food products and produce food products that are low carb, that have high fiber, that don't cause gastrointestinal upset, and that enable a person to thrive on this kind of dietary style. So, it's very possible that, we're going to see a lot more data come out around the keto diet consistently, and especially the carnivore version of this diet, like super problematic. I just cannot imagine how a microbiome can thrive on just meat. Like nobody grows a garden with dead meat. No one. And so I'm just not convinced. I'm just not. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think people go carnivore because their microbiomes are disrupted and their mucosa is no longer functioning adequately, and they have leaky gut, and the only thing their body can tolerate is what's close. Like what meat is a really low allergenic food. So I honestly think that that's the explanation why some people thrive on a carnivore diet. But I think that the optimal diet is a diet that's high in fiber. And so as somebody who tracks things like this, like I recently tried to see how many grams of fiber I was eating one day, and I was like really astonished that I wasn't even meeting my goal. And a lot of that has to do with dropping into ketosis. And so we have to realize that there's this relationship.
That makes sense. Another topic we mentioned just now was metabolic flexibility. What actually is metabolic flexibility? Is it just about improving insulin sensitivity by switching substrates, or is it something else?
So metabolic flexibility is largely the measurement of how quickly you can shift from carbohydrate to fat metabolism and back, or from carbohydrate to fat metabolism, or from fat metabolism to carbohydrate metabolism. So things through, like for example, fasting. From eating to fasting would be one measurement, or from fasting to eating would be one measurement. So going from ketosis to carb metabolism, and how quickly you shift the respiratory quotient, which is basically a equation that reflects the shift in carbon dioxide and oxygen that you're producing in metabolism. So in oxidative metabolism and cellular respiration. So if you think about it, from a basic perspective, you can also measure respiratory flexibility by giving a body a stimulus. So you can give a body a large amount of fat to see how quickly it starts metabolizing fat. You can give the body a large amount of carbohydrate to see how quickly it starts metabolizing carbs and what happens to it when it does that. So if you give the body a large stimulus of carbohydrates or fat, does the body have super normal levels, or is the body able to handle that load? So that's the flexibility of metabolism. It's literally, how can a body respond to these demands? And the thing is that in ketosis, the body is going to have this carb sparing mechanism that basically means that typically what happens naturally is your carbohydrate, your glucose levels are going to go up, but then they're going to stabilize. And if you're moving, and if you're moving as you're eating these carbs, you're not going to see you're not going to see a giant spike because you're actually going to be using that fuel. The problem is that in modern life, we're eating carbs and fats together all the time. We're not fasting really ever. And we're not moving our bodies while we're eating those carbs, unless you're a marathon runner or a cyclist. And what's happening is, you're not metabolically flexible. So you start seeing your blood sugar rise when you eat, when you eat the candy, and you start seeing the lipids rise because you're eating popcorn with, it's all this, butter flavored canola oil poured all over it. And the body's starting to lose its ability to shift between carb and fat metabolism. And so it just starts having high blood fats and high blood carbohydrates all the time. And so you're losing that capacity to maintain homeostasis. And that is metabolic inflexibility right there, is your body just cannot maintain normal blood sugar. Your body cannot maintain normal blood fats, and your systems are no longer able to adapt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So what's next for you? Where are you going from here?
Well, I teach a course at Stanford on living better longer. How do you extend your health span for longer lifespan? So I'm going to repeat teaching that course this spring. I'm starting to do retreats with some really cool places like Canyon Ranch and this place called Calorie in Arizona. So I'm working with retreat companies like Chosen Experiences, Calorie, and Canyon Ranch to bring my Healthspan protocols into the retreat format. And then I'm writing a book, and I'm working on getting it ready to sell to publishers. And then I'm also going to turn my course at Stanford into an online course. And I'm building a YouTube channel. So I'm going to be really moving into media. And I'm partnering with companies and startups like Bisu to promote their products and to promote the science behind their products. So I'm going to be doing a lot of content creation and a lot more media.
That's super exciting. That just leads me to say, thanks again, Molly. Thank you for joining us. And really excited to see more of the great things you'll be doing soon.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you for listening to the Bisu podcast. Please subscribe to receive a new episode every 2 weeks, and visit our blog at www.bisu.bio/blog to get a full transcript of this show, as well as other content to help you know and grow yourself. Until next time.